Yo, what is up, Laker family? Thanks for tuning into the show. We're coming at you on a Saturday afternoon. The Lakers played the Phoenix Suns last night at Staples Center and lost 115 to 105. They were down big most of the game, but they made a comeback in the fourth while the Suns had their guard down. But this game, I kind of predicted a blowout because of our bad perimeter defense at this moment and the Suns, very effective guards and Chris Paul, Booker, Cameron Payne. I thought it'd be a rough game for us, but it turned into a fucking soap opera, essentially. It started out pretty competitive. The Lakers were hitting shots in the first quarter, and Russell Westbrook ended the period with like 8 points, 4 assists. I just thought if Russ is kind of getting his groove down this early, maybe we're in for something good. And in the second quarter, the officials just basically took a massive shit on the Lakers. All stopped going in favor of the Lakers. The Suns were getting everything. And Phil, it reminded me of when we had our series against them. And I think it was after game 2. And Monty Williams, he cried to the media. And basically, they just owned the officials the rest of the series. It reminded me of that, man. So that happened in the second. They had the officials in the third quarter too, but it was the way the Lakers responded to it. They basically let it get into their own head too much, and they got overly emotional. Second quarter, I think, was the big moment that you've probably heard of now. Dwight and AD had a little scuffle on the sidelines. This came out of nowhere. I expected a blowout. I just didn't expect an emotional meltdown between our guys. Now, it's sports. Fights happen, especially, scuffles happen between teammates, especially if you're in the heat of the moment, you're losing like that, and the officials are pouring gasoline on the fire. But I didn't think it was anything serious. And shots showed later on that Dwight and AD ended up making up after the second half started. So, but I'd say the most promising thing to emerge from this was their fourth quarter run. We got to see Russell Westbrook, LeBron, AD, Melo, and Austin Reeves play some minutes together. Reeves is looking like a really good player, man, and he has no NBA experience, but he's fitting right into what we want to do. He's fitting in next to our stars. I'd say that run was the most encouraging thing about the game, but there's a lot to talk about today. And today I got Phil with me, one of our best friends of the show. You can find him on Twitter, PH Sizemore. Phil, how's it going today, man?
Not too bad, not too bad. It was a disappointing loss for sure, but we'll all make it through.
Yeah. To start things off, I'd love to hear about your overall assessment of the game and assessment of where you think the team is at based off the preseason and based off these first 2 losses.
Well, the first and the fourth quarters were pretty good, in particular with Russ's integration into the offense a little bit. The team is still definitely not where I want them to be, but in particular, they're not quite where I would expect them to be on the defensive end right now, especially given some of the talk that was coming out of training camp, the mistakes and a lot of the, oh, my guy's beaten, I guess I won't try that hard, mistakes that came through a lot, and that was particularly disappointing in the second and third quarters, which were just a complete dumpster fire, like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some positives, though. I am not screaming that the sky is falling just yet.
I'm not either, because I've kind of told myself, I usually like to give teams about 10 games to settle in and figure out who they are before I start making some sweeping judgments. I think I'm going to give this team maybe 20 to 30, maybe even like when we're into the winter, because what we're also hearing is that Russell Westbrook likes to start not that he likes to, but he just starts his years off kind of slowly. You throw that with a new position that he's in, a new role on a team as a third guy, and we're installing a new offensive system. We're trying to figure out where he fits into it. It's just a recipe for something that's going to take a lot of freaking time, man.
Well, this is the third consecutive year that he's had to start off with a new team. And Russ is an extremely unique player with an extremely unique combination of strengths and weaknesses that requires adjustment. And I think part of the thing, too, that people didn't emphasize quite enough coming into this year with the Lakers, looking back at the first 9 games in hindsight, even the degree of continuity that there was on this team, which was already small, the 4 guys who had played with Frank Vogel and AD and LeBron before on this team were Rondo, Avery Bradley, Dwight, So like those guys, with the exception of THT, none of them were on the team last year.
Mhm.
So even they haven't even been there for the continuity struggles last year. And all of that catching up and people having muscle memory and memories of playing with people and instincts about where to go, it takes time to rewire all of those instincts, especially when there are even more new faces and unique ones at that.
And we're seeing flashes of that muscle memory coming back with lobs from Rondo to AD, plays to Dwight, some good stuff. I mean, there's a good give and go between Rondo and LeBron last night too. Though I don't expect Rondo to get many minutes, man. Yeah, I think my big thoughts on this team are, how's Russell Westbrook going to fit into all of it? How are these minutes going to shake down? And then how are we going to defend guards when it's a guard heavy team like Phoenix, man? Because, I thought it was going to be a blowout. Even if we do get some better chemistry, unless people take a really big jump defensively, like Phoenix will be a matchup problem for us in that sense. And, we really had the personnel to handle it last year, but then we were hurt. Even our guards were hurt. KCP, Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso really didn't do that well defensively that series. There were a lot of times where campaign cooked him, but I really think healthy Caruso would have had a lot more to fight back with. You mentioned something about go ahead.
Speaking of unhealthy guards, the Kendrick Nunn his absence was felt in that game in particular, because the Lakers are getting killed in these Westbrook Rondo lineups. Every single time they're on the floor.
Rondo last night, though, compared to game one, thank goodness.
Yeah, well, game one, it was like 4 minutes. They were minus 13 in 4 minutes, and we didn't see as much of it last night, but we still saw some of it. Those minutes in situations where you either get back in the game or become a blowout are just killers. They're game-ruining minutes. And I think seeing those minutes that are currently going to Rondo going to someone like Kendrick Nunn, who has a quicker step on defense, who is a lot more of a spacing threat. So, some of the downward pressure during those non-LeBron minutes hopefully will dissipate when those people come back, but they're going to have to find a way to win games until they can get healthy.
They are. And admittedly, I didn't see a whole lot of Kendrick Nunn during the preseason, but you say if he's got a quicker step on defense and if he has a more threatening three-point shot, then that gives me something to look forward to. It's just too bad he's out for, 48 weeks? Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about continuity. I had wondered with this team, because this wasn't the team that lost to Phoenix outside of AD, LeBron, and THT, but I wondered if that same kind of like fuck Phoenix, let's beat these guys attitude was there. I think it definitely was there. Phoenix definitely had that with us, because I think they're still pissed about how we kind of like salsa danced on them, even though Jay Crowder salsa danced on us. But the game before that, when Andre Drummond had the infamous shot like that, yeah, we don't like each other, man. I feel like this is a good little rivalry we got going. I do not like the Suns at all. Campaign annoys the shit out of me. Jay Crowder, of course, annoys the shit out of me.
My entire household was laughing watching this game last night, because every time any of the Lakers got a chance, they hit Jay Crowder. Like every single time they could get away with it. I think I saw even Bazemore just like rode him all the way to the ground on a free throw box out and shoved him over, just because they don't like each other. You're right. And that the edge and the spice from an early season game, even when you're losing, it gives you something to look forward to coming down the season. You circle that next matchup and you want to get it back. And it makes the NBA regular season something it hasn't been in a little while with some of these internal rivalries. So
I know. Yeah, that's something.
I'm here for it.
Exactly. Do you think they're stronger this year compared to last year? It's been mostly the same team, but what do you think about them as a unit now?
I am interested to see if the contract situation affects their chemistry. Because
didn't affect it last night. They were fucking killing us on both ends.
I can see, paying from a Phoenix standpoint, I can see paying Bridges before Ayton. I can't see paying Bridges and Shamet before Ayton. And I'm certain that he feels the same way. And so it looks like at the moment, he's channeling that into, I'm going to be a beast on the court and make you look stupid for not paying me. Which, if he's doing that, they'll be better.
Barbara was like, that was the plan all along, motherfucker. That's right.
Yeah. So if that's how it ends up, affecting him all year, then they're probably going to be better, because he's showing the hunger a little bit in a way that he was more content to sort of fit into the team concept his first couple years and play his role. And he seems to be getting a bit more assertive this year than he has been. And that will get the best version of him, and that'll make them a very formidable team.
We saw that in the series last year, man. There were so many times in the series, I'm like, oh, I guess we're just going to give that up to Ayton. I think we were so focused on stopping Booker and Paul. And then in that series, I think Ayton really took a leap.
I'm very high on DeAndre Ayton's ceiling as a player. Like, I know he's taken a lot of crap in his first few years because he was the guy who went first the year that Luka and Trae Young were drafted. And like that's obviously always going to haunt him. But at the same time, he did something last year that both of those players failed to do last year, which was be a major contributor to an NBA Finals team.
Yeah.
And his defensive.
Trae was 2 wins away, though, to be fair. Trae definitely made a big leap.
Trae made an impact. He did. And Luka, has had 2 absolutely mind-blowing series against the Clippers, and his team has gone down in both of them. Mm-hmm. So the DeAndre Ayton is going to be a very, very good big in this league for a long time.
Yeah, he's certainly worth max money, in my opinion. I mean, if players really got paid, based on their, output and their value to the team, maybe he's worth a little less than a max, although you can argue like definitely the max. He's going to get the max because guys just get the max if they hit a certain threshold of very good in the league. Like, so he's definitely got that.
Somebody pays them.
Yeah. Fucking Tobias Harris got $36 million a year. Like, he got the like a 5-year deal from Philly. Like, if Tobias Harris gets that much money, then I think a lot of people can get a lot of money.
And I think it's a really underemphasized aspect of the NBA game in particular, and basketball in general, but especially the NBA game. It is more important for your bigs to have defensive impact than it is for them to have offensive impact. And it is more important for your wings to have offensive impact than defensive impact. Like, there are obviously levels to it. You can't be a complete crap defender, even if you're a really good offensive player and expect to get minutes. But there's an imbalance between the positions at how important those skills are and translate into on-court impact. And so I think good young defensive bigs tend to be sort of inherently undervalued because they take longer to develop, and people don't quite appreciate the degree of impact that they have when they mature.
Yeah, good point. And speaking of guys that can do both, I don't think the Lakers really have a lot of people outside of LeBron and AD. We got guys who can, shoot the hell out of it. And something I liked yesterday was I hadn't seen Monk play a whole lot, but when he got the ball and maybe the defense denied him a certain thing, he was able to make something. He was able to create something for himself. He was able to generate some shots, but he just keeps getting blown by. And then we got guys like Avery Bradley, who I still think deserves minutes on this team, even though he's getting clowned for being minus 25. I think he definitely deserves minutes. And I think based on what we saw with Austin Reeves, man, I mean, he rotates, he doesn't lose his man compared to the other guys that much. And he's like diet Alex Caruso, but with maybe a more threatening 3-point shot, which fits in perfectly with this team. What do you think?
It was not coincidental last night that the comeback started when he subbed in.
Nope.
That you could track that pretty exactly. And it's because the effort and the focus, like, this dude is playing for his NBA life every time he checks in.
Yep.
And he has that sense of urgency and that hunger, and he's delivering on a couple of key things that role players in his position need to be able to deliver on. And the fact that he's been able to do that so far is exciting. And if he keeps doing it, it'll keep being exciting, because, that if you do that over 82 games, then you have a chance to become a major contributor in a playoff run, even as a rookie.
Mm-hmm. I hope him and Bradley keep getting minutes because I trust their defense the most out of the rest of our guards. But then I think, we got THT coming back, and you can throw THT at like a small forward position, like a smaller lineup. We got Nunn coming back. And then we got guys like Monk and Ellington who want them to get their shots up too because they can provide value there. I just wonder, where the hell they're going to get those minutes once the team starts getting healthy.
But I think you just mentioned it and you put your finger on it, is that I think THT, when we originally looked at this roster, you think, okay, THT is going to get some minutes as the backup 2 guard. I don't think that that's necessarily where we're at anymore with this lineup. I think that he's going to be a full-time wing 3, even maybe small ball 4, depending on the lineups that are with him.
THT is a small ball 4. You're getting creative here.
I expect that we'll see it at different points this year, because having him move to wing with his length and sort of lateral quickness lets you squeeze in those other guys for minutes at the guard position. And he's the only one of them, I think, that has, aside from Bazemore, that really has the physical tools to slide down like that without giving something up.
Speaking of Bazemore, I kind of like what I've seen from him defensively, but man, the offense has been a little rough with him. And I think I've heard this from some Warriors fans that are like, oh, you guys got Bazemore? Okay. I can kind of see it in some of these shots where he'll just like be way fucking off. He'll try to generate something for himself, but I don't know. As like a spot up guy, I still think he can have a good role on this team. But talking about THT more, man, he could be devastating defensively if he just gets like some better instincts, some more experience under him. If you keep just going in that Frank Vogel, Phil Handy defensive boot camp, man, it's just that length. I mean, we talk about lateral quickness. What's quicker than just stretching your fucking arms out if you have a 7-foot wingspan,
Yeah, it's his proportions make no sense.
No.
whatsoever. But they're, it's really unique, and it's gonna, like you said, if he stays locked in, the potential is there.
He's gonna be freaking devastating, man. And we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I wanted to get your opinion. Who of the new Lakers has impressed you the most, you'd say? For me, it's Avery Bradley and Austin Reeves, man. I liked what Avery did defensively in game 1, and I'm not putting too much stock in the minus 25 last night.
Reeves has definitely impressed me. I liked what I saw from Nunn in the preseason, although we're going to obviously want to see him get some regular season minutes before we really judge where his impact is going to be on the team. But I think that the best version of this team needs him to be an important piece. And so that's one hinge sort of for the fate of this team that we should be looking at when he comes back. And I've also been really happy with how dynamic Malik Monk has been on offense. Mm-hmm. And how, for some reason, the problem on these LeBron Laker teams the last few years has been, it seems like people who aren't LeBron or AD have been a little scared to shoot the ball. Like they're deferring a little bit too much. Malik Monk is not scared to shoot the ball. And that is a healthy tendency in an offense that sometimes needs a spark from someone else on the floor. But also, as you mentioned earlier, his defense has been worse than expected, and we didn't expect it to be all that good to begin with. Mm-hmm. So he's going to need to clean that up.
You can say that for the defense in general. It's worse than expected, and we didn't expect it to be good. That kind of sums up our team defense. that speaking of defense, that really boiled over, if we want to touch on this, into the fight that happened. Not even a fight really, but just a little scuffle between AD and Dwight. It was weird, man. When we came back from the commercial, the announcers just said, and AD and Dwight just got onto it on the sidelines. Then they cut to it. You see them getting in each other's face, and AD puts his hand up or something to kind of push him away. I'm like, why are they fighting? What could they be fighting about? They said post game it was some defensive coverage, a pick and roll defense kind of issue. They were arguing about that, but what did you think about that fight? How much stock are you putting into it?
Not a whole lot, ultimately. Like, I think Dwight said that they squashed it, literally. So, they're both grown men and professionals. You take them at their word when they say that there's nothing wrong there. And I think in general, I don't hate that moment, even though it seems kind of like a tire fire drama moment. Because Dwight was kind of out of line for a lot of that game. He didn't have his emotions in check the way that he needed to. He was giving silly fouls. He was yelling at the officials. He was, letting other guys get in his head. And I appreciate that Anthony Davis was willing to step up to him and basically tell him to screw his head on straight, which is what it sounded like was going on
Yeah.
In the context. And so for me, that's, that's leadership. It's ugly because there's conflict, but I think in terms of the team dynamic, it's healthy in the long term.
Yeah. I was trying to rack my brain around what they were fighting over exactly. And I think what you said there was right. AD was just like, get your head on right, man. Because, I mean, one of those pick and roll defensive coverages, there's a time where I think AD and Dwight were on the floor. And then Dwight, he like kind of followed his guy, but he basically just conceded the paint to somebody who was driving on Phoenix. And I think it was right after that, that's when the fight happened. Yeah, I'm not putting too much stock in it either. Like you said, I think they're both accomplished guys and they've been in the league a long time and they're just frustrated. And
they're going to have particularly strong reactions because they trust each other. Like if they didn't expect each other to be in the right places, or if they didn't expect to be on the same page, they wouldn't be that pissed when they're not. So they have the tools needed to fix that and fix it quickly. It's just going to be a matter of getting on the same page and everyone focusing and calming down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, AD, we know that he's a defensive player of the year level player. Dwight's won 3 of them. They're really going to be the heart and soul of the defense, as well as LeBron. So that was just like a conflict of leadership right there, man. I expect them to be our 2 defensive stalwarts on the team. If we talk about the players we've been most impressed by, who are the players you've least been impressed by?
DeAndre Jordan.
Easy, easy number 1, dude.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that these are just courtesy starts from Frank, because I don't even think that he should be the second string center.
Same.
But it's veterans get certain treatment in this league. It is what it is, but I hope it doesn't last all of that long because he's just not capable of doing what's being asked of him anymore. And it's not fair to the team or to him to put him in that role and set him up to keep failing.
He looks like he's in decent shape too, so I get surprised when I see him getting like burnt that badly, or when he just can't secure a fucking rebound. I think I saw him secure his first rebound as a Laker last game. Because, dude, they kept just popping out of his hands every time. I'm like, what is going on with this guy?
Well, and he was never a really fast defender. He was a guy who always got by on his size, his jumping ability, and his instincts. And I think the kind of defender that he used to be is not as viable in the league as it was in his day, because of the need to cover.
If he's only 5 on the floor, then maybe. And if he can, get his instincts right again.
But I don't think he's got the speed, the foot speed to make it out there and still protect the rim. I think people can stretch him out too far on the floor for him to be a viable option.
Same. Yep. And what we saw a lot in game 1 was when AD and Jordan shared the floor. I feel like they were just dragging AD out of the paint, and then they were just scoring like a motherfucker in the paint. I think we saw Phoenix do that a lot in our playoff series too. That seems to be a strategy that a lot of teams go to. You just get AD out of the paint, man. I mean, it's been working so far.
I understand not wanting to start Dwight because he literally just generates fouls out of the ether. But at the same time, if you're going to make that sacrifice and say we're going to hold Dwight's minutes back from the beginning of each half to preserve fouls, then I think you have to be willing to commit to starting early with a smaller lineup and putting AD at the 5 with a more versatile 4 in LeBron. So that cannot happen.
If only Frank would just start AD at the 5 one time. Just do it one time, Frank. Just give it a shot. Just let's see how it goes. It's going to happen this year. I hope it happens soon. Whenever we have these ideas, and then I feel like Frank knows them too. He just doesn't act on them until it's like 5 or 10 games later, after people are like, hey, maybe Frank should do this. And then he needs some time for it to happen, I guess.
Maybe they're just pulling an elaborate prank on all of us.
Very elaborate.
Watching Lakers Twitter meltdown.
Yeah, could be. I have wondered if Frank has had burners, because I swear in our championship year, man, whenever there would be a big suggestion that would be being talked about, he would go to it pretty often. But there's a lot of times that he just does not. I think that you think they'll start AD at the 5 next game?
I doubt it. because I think it's probably like in general, it's never a good thing to bet on Frank Vogel changing something from one specific game to another specific game. Like you can bet given enough time that he'll change something if he needs to, but it's never a profitable thing to try to predict when he's going to make that change, I have found.
If betting Frank Vogel's lineups was a thing you could bet on, then that'd be the house will win every fucking time, I feel. I mean, unless you just wanted the conservative option, of course.
Yeah, it's
Go
pretty ironclad the way he does a lot of this stuff. But I think that I hope I say that I'm not guaranteeing it, but I hope that by the end of the year we will see AD starting at the 5 on a more regular basis.
I know. I think I saw somebody suggest on Twitter, start 80 at the 5 and then bring in Dwight or bring in DJ if you have to, for that like second shift of big guys. But just always having 1-5 in there. The double bigs just do not work, man. They said that they did it for matchup reasons these first 2 games, but I still feel like we would have held our own against,
Well, and Anthony Davis always has the longer first shift than LeBron does in these rotations every single time. So if he's starting at the 5, you're not going to need to go as deep in those center minutes because he's going to be eating up more of them right away. And you can have, Dwight in for longer stretches around breaks, like a quarter break, where it's not going to be as taxing on him and he's not going to get tired as quickly because he's getting more and more breathers in between those minutes. Like it can be done. And we saw Frank do it during the championship run in the bubble pretty effectively. He just waited until then to do it for reasons we know not what.
He likes to take his time with it, man. I just like the idea of just having one big guy in there all the time. It makes a lot of our lineups work out a lot better. It makes the spacing work out a lot better. I hope we see it soon, man. Last thing in regards to this game that I wanted to talk about was just the fourth quarter comeback, man. How much stock do we want to put into it? I liked that Frank he just kept the starters in because you could argue, like, why is he keeping them in? They could be risking an injury. I just think they need on-court minutes together. And, practice minutes are not nearly the same as in a game against another team that you don't know. So when I saw him that he kept the players in there, he kept LeBron, Russ, and AD in there, I was like, good. Let them play together a little more. Let them feel some success so they could have something to lean back on. So what do you think of that fourth quarter comeback, quote unquote?
Every single possession on offense that ends positively and includes Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis is a really good thing for this team, because those are the 2 guys that they're going to have to be able to coexist well on offense for this team to be the best version of itself. And it is Westbrook's negative impact on the overall spacing of the offense that impacts Anthony Davis's game the most, because he's the recipient of those extra defenders far more often than not.
Yep.
So every time those 2 guys can figure out a way on the court to figure it out, whether it's a quick rescreen because someone's going under the screen to create a mismatch, whether it's, Russ setting a screen for AD as a handler, there are creative ways to do it. But every time that they figure out how to make those actions work and get around the spacing deficiencies and figure out where those defenders are coming from, that's one step toward this team becoming the best version of itself.
Yep. Couldn't agree more with that. I also like that Melo was on the court during that too, because I'd like to see him succeed with the team, but his defense has, as we said earlier, we expected bad, but it's probably been a little worse than what we expected. But he definitely brings an element of shot creation that last year's team didn't have. He's willing to take those shots, and we won't always make them, but he's willing to generate looks for himself, and I appreciate that about him.
Yes, creativity on the court is, one thing we learned watching the Lakers last year. Not everybody can do it.
And I thought they could do it a little better than they did last year, man. I thought having Dennis Schroeder and having Trez, just that alone, I thought that would have been offense, but we really didn't. I feel like we really didn't get a lot of 2-man game out of those guys, man.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. Last thing, just looking ahead to Memphis. We're playing Memphis on Sunday. You got any thoughts on the game or the matchup?
Well, in general, the next stretch of schedule looks a bit softer. There's a couple games against Houston, game against Cleveland, game, like you said, against Memphis. So playing a little bit less high profile of an opponent in a less tense setting, like it was against Steph, like it was against the Suns. Hopefully that'll make it a bit easier for guys to relax and figure things out on both ends. And also shout out Ja Morant. He's my favorite young player in the league. I love watching him every time I can. He's just a fun player to watch, really dynamic, smart, good leader.
Reminds us of young Russell Westbrook. Maybe we'll get some cool moments there, like the old dog versus the new.
Well said.
Yeah, we think that, we look at Memphis and they've been a bad team for a long time, but they're in the play-in game last year and they beat Steph. Off the top of my head, I don't know how much continuity they have from last year. I don't think this is going to be an easy game. I think we're going to have to fight for it, honestly, because they have a playoff win under their belt. They, I don't know, they've been a bad team for a long time. Like I said earlier, I just don't think we should underestimate them. So I think this will be a surprisingly competitive one. We're still trying to figure ourselves out. But I think the Lakers finally get the first win of the season tomorrow night.
Yeah, I agree. And I do not think Memphis will make it easy. Like, Ja loves playing in big games. He showed us that during the play-in run in his first playoff series last year. So he will bring it, and the Lakers will have to be sharp. But they're very slowly moving in the correct direction.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, it's always great having you on. I think you dropped some really good thoughts on the Lakers. Thanks for hopping on again. We'll do this again soon.
Thanks for having me, man. Anytime.
Yeah, take it easy.